The day of the interview had finally arrived, and the Millionaire CEO, known for his sharp eye in hiring the right people, was preparing for what he expected to be another usual round of interviews. His company had been growing rapidly, and the role of an executive assistant was crucial. This person would have to handle not only the CEO's daily schedule, but also manage client communications, ensure office operations ran smoothly, and be a right hand to him, someone he could trust completely. It was always a busy time at the office, with everyone rushing around preparing for meetings, deadlines, and tasks. The CEO had a lot on his plate, but this position was the one that mattered the most in his eyes. He needed someone reliable, someone he could count on when things got chaotic. His assistant wasn't just going to be a support. They were going to play a pivotal role in how things ran behind the scenes. As the morning sun streamed through the glass windows of his office, the CEO took a moment to relax before the first candidate arrived. He went through the resumes once more, looking at the qualifications, the work experience, and the skills. But what he valued most was the potential in each person, their ability to grow with the company. The best candidate wasn't always the one with the most experience, but the one who was eager to learn, adaptable, and trustworthy. He checked his watch. Almost time. The first candidate was due to arrive any minute now. Around that time, the receptionist buzzed in on the intercom, letting him know the first interviewee was there. The CEO was ready, standing up from his desk and adjusting his tie. A quick glance in the mirror showed he was looking professional as usual, and he was eager to get started. He had a clear idea of what to expect from this interview, and was mentally prepared for the usual formalities. He stepped out of his office and greeted the receptionist, who seemed to be expecting a guest. But something unusual happened when she opened the door. Instead of the grown professional candidate the CEO had expected, a little girl walked in. The girl, no older than 7 or 8, stood there quietly, holding her mother's hand. The CEO stopped in his tracks. There was no mistake. It was the girl who had been scheduled for the interview. But this didn't make sense. The position wasn't for children. Surely this was some mistake. He looked around at the receptionist, who was just as confused. "Hello?" the CEO said, his voice uncertain. He wasn't sure how to proceed. The little girl smiled shyly but didn't seem nervous at all. Instead, she looked up at him confidently, as if this were a normal part of her day. She stood there in a small but neat dress, her hair in a ponytail, and her big bright eyes were full of curiosity. She wasn't fidgeting like most children in strange situations would. She seemed completely composed. "I'm here for the interview," the girl said, her voice soft but clear. "My mom's unwell, so I came instead." The CEO was taken aback. He blinked, not sure if he had heard that right. He glanced at the receptionist, who simply shrugged, clearly as puzzled as he was. The little girl didn't seem fazed by the situation. She just smiled and walked into the office as if she had done this 1,000 times. The CEO motioned for them both to sit down. His mind was racing. What was going on here? This was completely unexpected. Still, he decided not to make any snap judgments. He had learned long ago that things didn't always go as planned, and sometimes the most surprising situations led to the best results. So he decided to proceed with the interview, albeit a bit hesitantly. He sat down across from the girl, who was perched on the chair, her legs barely touching the floor. "So you're here to interview for the assistant position, right?" he asked, trying to remain professional despite the odd situation. "Yes," the girl replied, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "My mom said I could answer your questions, and I'm really good at helping at home." The CEO raised an eyebrow, confused but intrigued. He had to admit, there was something about this little girl that made him want to hear more. He knew that this interview wasn't going to follow any of the usual rules, but he decided to give her a chance. "All right then," the CEO said with a small smile. "Let's start. Why do you think you would be good at this job?" The girl didn't hesitate. "Because I help my mom a lot at home," she said matter-of-factly. "I organize things, make sure everyone has what they need, and keep everything in order. I even remind my little brother when it's time to do his homework." The CEO blinked, slightly surprised at how she explained herself. This wasn't exactly what he had expected, but there was something about her sincerity that was compelling. It wasn't the usual "I have 5 years of experience" or "I'm proficient in office software," but the more he listened, the more he realized this little girl wasn't just speaking from imagination. She was speaking from her own experiences at home. "You sound like you've learned a lot about taking care of things," the CEO said, nodding thoughtfully. "But this job would require you to work with a lot of adults and handle business matters. Do you think you could manage that?" Without a hint of doubt, the girl looked him in the eye and said, "I can do it. I've watched my mom do it all the time. She talks to people on the phone, makes sure we have everything for school, and helps my dad with his work. She's really good at it, and I think I could be good at it too." The CEO couldn't help but smile. This wasn't like any interview he'd ever had before. He was used to candidates who spoke with confidence, but it was clear this little girl wasn't just trying to impress him. She was simply sharing her truth. In her eyes, this was just another day of helping, just another task to handle. He leaned back in his chair, thinking for a moment. "What makes you feel like you can take on responsibilities like that? Most kids your age are focused on school and playing. Why do you think you're ready for something like this?" The girl thought for a moment, then shrugged. "Because I'm always helping. My mom is sometimes too tired, so I do things for her. I've learned how to make things work, even when it's tough." The CEO was moved by her response. There was no pretense, no attempt to sound more grown-up than she was. She simply stated facts that came from her own life, showing maturity far beyond her years. The more he listened, the more he realized this little girl was not just playing pretend. She was offering real insight into her world. And the way she handled things at home demonstrated qualities of resilience, organization, and care. As he sat there listening, the CEO found himself wondering about the girl's mother. Who was she? And how had she raised a child so thoughtful and composed? But most of all, he started to think about the kind of person who could walk into an office and, without hesitation, handle a situation that no one could have expected. The CEO was impressed. This might not be the typical interview, but it was proving to be one of the most interesting ones he had ever had. The CEO sat back in his chair, still processing everything the little girl had said. He was starting to realize that this was no ordinary interview. In all his years of hiring, he had never encountered anything like this, and for some reason, he didn't want to dismiss it too quickly. There was something refreshing about her honesty, her innocence, and the way she spoke with such confidence about the responsibilities she had at home. It was unlike any answer he had ever heard in an interview. For a moment, there was silence in the room. The girl's eyes, wide and expectant, met his. She was waiting for his next question, but the CEO couldn't help but think about the oddness of it all. This little girl was in a room meant for serious business discussions, and yet she didn't seem out of place at all. In fact, there was something inspiring about how she seemed to take everything in stride. "Tell me more about your mom," the CEO asked, his voice softer now, intrigued by her story. "What does she do? How does she manage all these responsibilities you've told me about?" The girl's face lit up at the mention of her mom. She looked up as if reflecting for a moment before answering. "My mom's the best," she said, her voice full of pride. "She works really hard, but she always makes time for us. She helps people at work too, and she always knows how to fix problems. She's really good at her job, even though sometimes she gets really tired, but she never complains." The CEO listened closely. He could hear the admiration in the girl's voice, and it struck him deeply. This child had such respect for her mother. It wasn't just about what her mother did for her. It was about how she carried herself, how she handled challenges, and how she managed to make everything work even when times were tough. "I think you're very lucky to have a mom like that," the CEO said, a hint of emotion in his voice. The girl nodded. "I am," she said quietly. "She's the strongest person I know." For a brief moment, the CEO was lost in thought. He could relate to her words more than he cared to admit. His own mother had been a source of strength for him, teaching him lessons that had stuck with him his entire life. He knew the value of hard work, the importance of resilience, and the need to support the people around you. It was clear that the girl's mother had passed on those same values. "You seem like you've learned a lot from her," the CEO said thoughtfully. "I have," the girl replied. "I've learned how to take care of things and help out when someone needs it. Like today, when my mom couldn't come, I knew I had to step in for her. I didn't want to let her down." The CEO smiled at that. He could see it now. This wasn't just a little girl playing dress-up. She had been raised to handle things, to take on responsibility, and to help out in any way she could. And though she wasn't a professional, There was a raw sense of maturity about her that couldn't be ignored. After a few more moments of reflection, the CEO spoke again. "So you came here today because your mom couldn't make it, right?" he asked, his voice steady. "What made you decide to come in her place?" The girl shrugged, looking up at him with those bright eyes. "Because she needed me to," she said simply. "I'm not scared of interviews. I've seen my mom do them before, and I knew I could answer your questions even though I'm not a grown-up." Her words struck him like a bolt of lightning. Here was a child, no older than 8, who had the kind of confidence that many adults struggled to find. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't pretense. It was pure, unfiltered confidence in her own ability to rise to the occasion. It was a kind of bravery that most people, no matter their age, lacked. The CEO took a deep breath and leaned forward. He had been in so many interviews over the years, but none had ever made him feel the way this one did. He realized that this little girl had done something that many grown-ups couldn't. She had shown him that it was possible to rise to the moment, no matter how unexpected or difficult it might seem. "You know," the CEO said after a long pause, "I think you might be the most interesting person I've ever interviewed." The girl smiled, her eyes wide with surprise. "Really?" The CEO chuckled softly. "Yes, really. You've shown me something that many adults don't even realize. They think they need all the qualifications and experience to succeed. But sometimes it's about the willingness to step up and try, even when things seem impossible." The girl beamed with pride. "I always try my best," she said. "That's what my mom says to me. Just do your best and the rest will follow." The CEO couldn't help but smile at that. It was the kind of advice he had heard 1,000 times in his life. But hearing it from this little girl who had lived those words herself made them feel fresh and meaningful. "So, tell me," the CEO continued, leaning back in his chair, "if you could help your mom with anything at all, what would you want to do?" The girl thought for a moment, then looked up at him, a serious expression on her face. "I'd want to help her with her work," she said. "She has a lot to do, and sometimes she gets really tired. I want to make sure she doesn't have to do everything by herself." The CEO nodded, impressed by her answer. It wasn't just about the job. It wasn't just about her helping her mom with household chores or tasks. It was about her wanting to make her mother's life easier, taking the load off, even if it meant stepping into roles she wasn't technically qualified for. "You're a very thoughtful little girl," the CEO said, his voice full of admiration. "Thank you," she replied, her smile brightening the room. As the interview went on, the CEO found himself feeling more and more captivated by the girl. He wasn't sure how much more he could ask her. After all, she was just a child. But somehow the conversation had become something more meaningful than a typical interview. It wasn't about checking boxes on a resume or testing for specific skills. It was about character, about what kind of person someone was deep down, and how they approached challenges. The CEO was beginning to realize that in many ways, this little girl was already demonstrating the very qualities he valued most in a future employee. She wasn't just answering his questions. She was teaching him lessons in resilience, responsibility, and empathy. And for the first time, the CEO started to wonder if maybe he had been too focused on the wrong things when it came to hiring. He had been so intent on finding someone with the perfect qualifications and experience. But what if, just maybe, the perfect candidate was someone who could step up in the face of uncertainty, who could handle challenges with grace and confidence, and who had the heart to make a difference? The CEO sat there, his mind still racing from everything that had happened during the interview. He had never expected to find himself in a situation like this. Here he was, sitting across from a little girl who had walked into a job interview meant for adults, not with any fear or hesitation, but with a quiet confidence and wisdom beyond her years. The room felt different now, calmer, quieter. The usual tension he experienced during interviews wasn't there. Instead, there was something oddly peaceful in the way the girl spoke, the way she answered every question with ease and maturity. Her presence was, in a strange way, almost comforting. After a few moments of silence, the CEO leaned forward. He realized that he had to know more about her story, about her life. The interview was no longer about hiring someone for a job. It was about understanding this remarkable little person in front of him. "So, what do you like to do for fun?" he asked, hoping to shift the conversation to something a little lighter. The girl smiled immediately, her face lighting up. "I like drawing," she said, "and reading stories. My mom reads to me every night before bed. She tells me all kinds of stories, and sometimes I make up my own. The CEO found himself smiling, fascinated by the way the girl was able to switch from talking about serious topics like responsibility and helping her mother to something as simple as enjoying a bedtime story. There was no pretense about her, just an honest, open answer that made her feel even more real. More human. That sounds wonderful, the CEO said, leaning back in his chair. What kinds of stories do you like? I like stories about people who are strong and brave, the girl said, her voice becoming animated. People who help others no matter what. That's what I want to be like when I grow up. The CEO raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her answer. And what about your mom, he asked. Is she the strongest person you know? The girl nodded. Yes, she said confidently. My mom is the bravest person I know. She works so hard every day and she always makes sure I have everything I need. She doesn't let anything stop her. Even when she's tired or not feeling well, she just keeps going. There was something in the way the girl spoke that struck the CEO deeply. It wasn't just admiration. It was a deep, almost reverent understanding of her mother's strength. It was clear that she looked up to her mom in a way that most children didn't. To her, her mother wasn't just a caregiver or an authority figure. She was a role model, a hero. I think your mom would be proud of you, the CEO said softly, his voice full of sincerity. You've learned a lot from her, haven't you? The girl's face brightened at the compliment and she nodded. I want to be just like her when I grow up, she said with determination in her voice. I want to help people too. The CEO could feel his admiration for the girl growing with every word she spoke. It wasn't just the fact that she had stepped into this situation in place of her mother. It was the way she viewed the world, her sense of responsibility, and the compassion she showed. As the conversation continued, the CEO couldn't help but think back to his own childhood. He had grown up in a similar way, surrounded by hard-working parents who taught him the value of perseverance, honesty, and doing your best, no matter the odds. He wondered if the girl's mother had faced similar struggles, teaching her daughter the same values she had learned over the years. The girl paused for a moment, as if thinking about something. Then she spoke again, her voice quieter now. I think it's important to help people, even when you don't have to. My mom always says that being kind and helping others is the most important thing we can do. The CEO sat still for a moment, absorbing her words. There was a lot of truth in what the girl was saying, truth that often got lost in the hustle and bustle of the corporate world. People were so focused on competition, on making more money, on climbing the corporate ladder, that they often forgot the simple act of helping one another. What about you? The girl asked suddenly, breaking his train of thought. Do you help people? The question took him by surprise. The CEO paused, thinking for a moment. It wasn't something he often thought about. His job was demanding, and sometimes it felt like there wasn't enough time in the day to even take care of his own needs, let alone help others. But as he looked at the little girl in front of him, he realized that she was asking a question that had been lingering in his mind for years. Did he help people? Truly help them without any expectations in return? I try to, he said slowly. But sometimes it's hard to find the time. You know, with everything going on at work. The girl nodded as if she understood, but her expression was thoughtful. You could do more, though, she said quietly, almost to herself. Everyone can. The CEO felt a lump form in his throat at her words. It wasn't a reprimand, just a simple statement of fact. And in that moment, it felt like the truth. Everyone could do more. He knew he could. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of clarity. The girl's words had struck a chord within him. He had spent so many years focusing on building his business, on achieving success, that he had neglected one of the most important things in life, helping others. The room was quiet again, and the CEO felt a sense of calm wash over him. He looked at the girl, who was still sitting there patiently waiting for the next question. She was so full of wisdom, so much more than her age suggested, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe toward her. He cleared his throat, finally speaking again. What do you want to be when you grow up? He asked, his voice soft. The girl smiled brightly, her eyes sparkling. I want to be a doctor, she said with enthusiasm. I want to help people get better, make them feel better when they're sick. The CEO smiled back. That's a wonderful goal, he said. I have no doubt you'll do great things when you grow up. The girl's smile widened. Thank you, she said, clearly pleased by his response. As the interview continued, the CEO found himself more and more captivated by this little girl. She had shown him something he had been missing for a long time, a reminder of what truly mattered. In her innocent way, she had made him see that success wasn't just about achievements or numbers. It was about people, helping them, caring for them, and making a difference in their lives. By the end of the interview, the CEO knew he had learned something valuable. The girl had taught him more than he could have ever expected. And while she may not have been the typical candidate for the role, there was no doubt in his mind that she had qualities that made her truly special. As the girl got up to leave, the CEO stood up as well. "Thank you," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "You've given me a lot to think about." The girl smiled up at him, her face full of innocence and joy. "I'm glad I could help," she said simply. And with that, she left the room, leaving the CEO with a sense of gratitude that he had never felt before. He realized that sometimes the most unexpected encounters could have the biggest impact on your life. As he sat back down at his desk, he knew that the lessons he had learned from this little girl would stay with him for a long time, and maybe, just maybe, it was time for him to start making more of an effort to help others, just as she had taught him. As the days passed after the unusual interview, the CEO couldn't stop thinking about the little girl who had walked into his office. The encounter had left an impression on him, one that he couldn't shake. Her words, her confidence, the way she had so easily taken on the responsibility meant for an adult, it had all been so striking. He had been impressed by her maturity, but more than that, it was her heart that stood out. She wasn't here to impress him or to get a job. She was simply doing what she thought was right, stepping up in her mother's place when she couldn't. His mind often drifted back to her answer about her mom, how she said her mom was the strongest person she knew. The way the little girl had spoken about her mother with such reverence, with such love, made him reflect on his own life and the people he looked up to. In many ways, the little girl reminded him of his own upbringing. She had learned to be strong and resilient not through lectures or books, but through real-life experiences. The CEO knew he had to meet the girl's mother. There was something about their bond, something about the way the little girl spoke about her that made him want to learn more. He wanted to understand what kind of person could raise such an incredible child. He made up his mind to reach out to her mother, even though he wasn't sure exactly what he was hoping to accomplish. Maybe it was simply to express his admiration, or perhaps to see how this family operated, how they balanced their lives, their responsibilities, and still managed to show such kindness and strength. A few days later, he finally decided to act on his impulse. He called the phone number on the girl's resume, which he had initially thought was just a formality. When the mother answered, he was struck by the warmth in her voice. He introduced himself, and after the usual pleasantries, he couldn't help but say, "I've had the most unusual interview recently, and I just had to reach out." The mother was quiet for a moment, then chuckled softly. "You're talking about my daughter, aren't you?" "Yes," the CEO said, his voice filled with a mix of humor and admiration. "I've never had an interview quite like that one. She came in, answered all my questions, and left me thinking more about my own life than about the position I was hiring for." The mother laughed, and it was clear from the sound that she wasn't surprised. "That sounds like her," she said warmly. "She's always been mature for her age. I'm glad she made an impression on you." "I don't know how to explain it," the CEO continued. "It wasn't just that she was confident or composed. It was the way she spoke about you. I could tell she looks up to you in a way that most children don't. She has this deep respect for you and what you do." The mother's voice softened, and there was a slight pause before she spoke again. "She's my rock, you know. When I started raising her, I didn't know if I was doing everything right. There were so many challenges, and I had to work long hours to make ends meet. But she was always there, always helping in little ways. Over time, she became more than just my daughter. She became my partner in life." The CEO could hear the emotion in her voice, and he felt a deep sense of respect for both of them. "You've done an incredible job," he said sincerely. "I can tell. Your daughter has this wisdom, this understanding of life that most adults don't even have." The mother chuckled softly again. "I think she's learned it all from watching me and seeing how we've made things work. It hasn't always been easy, but we've always had each other, and that's what really matters in the end." "I agree," the CEO said, his voice full of reflection. "I think we often forget what truly matters in life. It's easy to get lost in the race for success, to chase after things that don't really make us happy. But hearing her talk about you, about how much she admires you, reminds me that there's more to life than just achieving goals. There's the people we care about, the ones we help along the way. The conversation shifted from the interview to more personal topics. The CEO found himself opening up in a way he hadn't expected. Talking with this woman, hearing her talk about her daughter with such love and respect made him feel like he had known them both for years. It was clear that their bond was something special, something rooted in mutual support and understanding. As they spoke, the CEO realized that he hadn't truly understood what it meant to make a difference in someone's life. He had spent so many years building his company, focusing on the bottom line. But hearing the mother speak about her daughter, about how she had raised her with so much love and care, made him realize there was another kind of success, the kind that didn't show up in numbers or spreadsheets, the kind that was measured by how much you gave, how much you helped, and how much you cared for the people around you. By the time the conversation came to an end, the CEO felt a deep sense of gratitude. He thanked the mother for taking the time to speak with him and expressed how much he admired what she had done with her life and with her daughter. As he hung up the phone, he felt a shift within himself. He wasn't sure exactly what was next, but he knew that something had changed. He had been inspired, and he felt a responsibility to do more, to be better, to help more, to focus on the things that really mattered. A few days later, the CEO decided to do something he had never done before. He reached out to the little girl's mother again, this time with a proposition that was completely different from what she might have expected. He invited her to come to the office, not for a job interview, but for a meeting. He told her that he wanted to offer her an opportunity to work with him, to help in a way that would benefit both of them. When the mother arrived at the office, she was clearly surprised by the invitation. She had expected a follow-up about her daughter's interview, but instead the CEO greeted her warmly and asked her to sit down. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation," the CEO began. "About you, about your daughter, about everything you've both been through. And I've realized something. You're not just an incredible mother. You're someone who has a lot to offer, someone with wisdom and experience that I can learn from. I'd like to offer you a position in my company, not just as an employee, but as a partner. I think you'd bring a unique perspective, and I want to work with you." The mother sat there stunned. She had never expected such an offer. Her eyes filled with emotion as she tried to find the right words. "I don't know what to say," she said softly. "This is such an unexpected honor. I never imagined anything like this." The CEO smiled. "It's not just about your qualifications. It's about your heart. You've shown me that success isn't just about what we achieve. It's about how we help others. And I want you to be a part of something bigger than just a job. I want you to help make a real difference." Over the next few weeks, the mother began working with the CEO, bringing her unique insights to the company. And while she didn't have a background in the business world, her approach, rooted in empathy, responsibility, and care, began to make a huge difference. She brought a fresh perspective to the team, one that emphasized the importance of people over profits, collaboration over competition. The CEO had learned a valuable lesson through it all. The little girl had opened his eyes to something that had been missing from his life. And as he worked alongside her mother, he realized that he had been given an incredible gift, a chance to grow not just as a business leader, but as a person. And through it all, he knew that it was not just about the job. It was about the people you meet along the way and the impact you have on their lives and the impact they have on yours. Weeks turned into months, and the CEO found himself reflecting more and more on the lessons he had learned from the little girl and her mother. He had never expected such a small act of stepping in for someone to have such a profound impact on his life. What had started as an unusual job interview had turned into a journey of self-discovery and growth, something that had completely changed his perspective on leadership, success, and what truly mattered in life. The mother, who had joined the company not long after their conversation, had quickly become an invaluable part of the team. Despite not having the corporate experience that others had, she brought a fresh, compassionate approach to every challenge. It was as if she could see things from a different angle, one that was rooted in understanding, empathy, and practical problem-solving. Her advice often proved to be the most helpful. and her ability to work with people to understand their needs and motivations was something the CEO admired deeply. But it wasn't just her work ethic that impressed him. It was the way she had raised her daughter, the way she had built their lives together despite all the struggles they had faced. The CEO realized that the key to their success was not about material wealth or external recognition. It was about the strength of their bond, the trust and respect they shared, and the simple, quiet way they cared for one another. Over time, the CEO began to change. The lessons he had learned from the girl's words, from watching the way her mother approached every challenge, made him look at his own life differently. He started to slow down, to spend more time with the people who truly mattered. He stopped chasing after numbers and targets and focused instead on the kind of person he wanted to be, both in his personal life and as a leader. He began to notice the small things, the little moments that so many people overlooked. He started spending more time with his own family, making sure they knew how much he cared. He made an effort to be present, to listen, and to support the people around him. He realized that true success wasn't measured by how many hours he worked or how many meetings he attended. It was about how much he gave to the people he loved, and how much he helped others along the way. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual shift, one that took time and conscious effort. But the more he embraced these changes, the more he saw the impact it had not only on his personal life but also on his business. His team, inspired by the example set by the mother and daughter, began to adopt a similar approach. They started focusing more on collaboration, on understanding each other's needs, and on working together to achieve shared goals. The atmosphere at the office shifted, becoming warmer, more inclusive, and more supportive. The little girl who had been the catalyst for all of this change continued to be a source of inspiration. The CEO often found himself thinking back to that first interview, to the way she had walked into the room without hesitation, the way she had spoken about her mother with such pride and admiration. He marveled at her ability to stay calm and confident in an unfamiliar situation, to show up for someone she loved without a second thought. He had learned so much from her, and he found himself wanting to pass those lessons on. He started mentoring young people in the company, offering them guidance not just on the technical aspects of their jobs, but on life in general. He shared the lessons he had learned, about the importance of kindness, about being present for the people you care about the power of resilience and empathy. He hoped that by sharing his own journey, he could inspire others to embrace the same values that had so deeply changed his life. Months later, during a company meeting, the CEO stood in front of his team and shared a story, one that no one had expected him to tell. It wasn't about a business deal or a financial success. It was about a little girl who had walked into an interview, a girl who had changed his life forever. "I want to tell you all something," he began, his voice calm but filled with emotion. "There's something I've learned over the past few months that I think is more important than any business goal or target we can set. I've learned that success isn't just about what we achieve or how much we make. It's about how we treat each other, about how we help the people around us. It's about being kind, being present, and doing our best, not just for ourselves, but for the people we care about." The room was silent, and the team listened intently as the CEO continued. "I've learned that it's okay to slow down sometimes, to take a step back and focus on what truly matters. I've learned that we don't have to chase after the next big thing to feel fulfilled. What really makes us rich is the love, the trust, and the support we share with others." He paused for a moment, his eyes scanning the room. "And all of these lessons, started with a little girl who walked into an interview. A girl who taught me that the most important qualities in life, honesty, empathy, and love, are the things that make us truly successful." The team sat in awe, moved by his words. The CEO had never spoken like this before. He had always been focused on the business, on the numbers, but now he was speaking from the heart, sharing his own personal transformation. Later that day, as the CEO walked back to his office, he felt a deep sense of peace. It was as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He no longer felt the pressure to constantly prove himself, to always be striving for the next achievement. He realized that he had already achieved something far more important. He had learned how to truly live, to connect with others, and to appreciate the simple, everyday moments that made life worth living. He knew that he still had a long way to go, that there would always be challenges and setbacks, But he also knew that he was no longer facing those challenges alone. He had the support of his team, the love of his family, and the lessons of a little girl who had changed everything. As time went on, the CEO continued to work closely with the mother, and together, they made a lasting impact on the company. They continued to grow and innovate, but now, they did so with a focus on people, on creating a workplace where everyone felt valued, where collaboration and empathy were prioritized over competition. The little girl, too, continued to inspire those around her. Though she was still young, her wisdom and kindness had left an indelible mark on everyone she met. The CEO often thought about how much potential she had, and he looked forward to seeing the incredible things she would do when she grew older. He knew that she was destined for greatness not because of her achievements, but because of the heart and spirit she carried with her. In the end, the CEO realized that the greatest legacy anyone could leave behind wasn't the wealth they accumulated or the success they achieved. It was the difference they made in the lives of others, the love they shared, and the lessons they taught. And for him, that all started with a little girl who walked into an interview and changed his life forever.